Exploration, the desire to venture forth into the great unknown, discover what is located in said great unknown, and to shove a Union Jack into it. This desire inspired many, from the conquistadors striking it out in the New World for glory, God and gold, to the voyages of Captain James Cook mapping areas of New Zealand so remote they somehow remain unmapped on most maps to this day. The same desires that motivated our caveman ancestors to go see what is on the other side of that hill motivate us today to explore space itself, which has been affectionately called
the final frontier.
Exploration as a concept appeals to many, and its stories like those of David Livingstone and expeditions into the North Pole continue to inspire. So why does exploration suck so much in Paradox games? Well, today I plan to go through a decent sample of the Paradox titles in question, and attempt to address it to the best of my ability. But before we do, quick pit stop to say that a like would be appreciated and a subscription would be amazing if you haven't already. 55k subs has been achieved, and it has been recently brought to my attention that I have less subscribers than the Austrian Starting Force Summit, which is an unacceptable state of events. Hence, if you would like to help me resolve that issue, make sure to subscribe down below. But with that said, let's get into Crusader Kings. I'll be skipping Imperator Rome since Paradox Interactive has also decided to skip Imperator Rome, but with that said, Crusader Kings III begins in 867 and lasts well into the 15th century, ending pretty conveniently right before the Age of Exploration takes off. Now, the collapse of the Western Roman Empire was naturally not widely regarded as a good time for the residents of Western Europe, but by the 8th and 9th century, especially following the Carolingian Renaissance, Western Europe would technically be considered in a state where funding exploration and other pursuits like science was technically possible. The issue, of course, was that, oh boy, Western Europe was not having a good time in the 9th century and onwards. The Vikings would descend upon England, Ireland, northern France, Germany and Eastern Europe, leading to a decreased interest in exploration and an increased interest in not being stabbed. Meanwhile, Iberia and southern Italy were, shall we say, populated by a fine selection of gentlemen known as Sunni Muslims, who were not exactly maintaining cordial relations with the Europeans as they invaded their lands, which yet again directed even more national attention towards the try not to get stabbed public funding category. Finally, the Eastern Front, as it were, was anything but secure. Charlemagne had persuaded some of the residents in Saxony to embrace Jesus, but Denmark and Poland were full of individuals ready to engage with Charlemagne's descendants in a theological debate. Hungary, for example, was literally under the nomad Avars until Pepin of Italy decided to do something about them, and that was less than 100 years ago from the start date. But simply, Western Europe at this point was a touch preoccupied with other concerns. While we still do see exploration expeditions like those of Marco Polo, in good faith we have to recognize it's one guy going on a trip. In the 13th century, after Europe had 500 years to chill, and Venice had 500 years at this point to get filthy rich. With that said, Western Europe was not the only place around in the Crusader Kings period, and indeed in the East and South, honestly, frankly all over the place, we saw the Muslim world. Once we leave Western Europe, we saw the situation regarding exploration become much less bleak. The Muslim world was going through what is now known as the Islamic Golden Age, between the 8th and 13th century, which was very helpful for them since Europe could steal all those Roman texts that they themselves stole right back from them during that whole Renaissance thing Europe would do later. Anyway, outside of inventing stuff like the quadratic formula, thanks al-Khwarizmi, the Muslims also decided to give exploration a go, and boy did they. Muslim influence spread throughout North Africa and pierced deep into the continent to reach Mali, and through exploration and colonization into the Horn of Africa, they set up outposts such as Ajuran and explored into the Indian Ocean as well as beyond, reaching Malaya and the Spice Islands, an influence that remains to this day. So, exploration certainly happened. How is this represented in Crusader Kings III though? Well, as unlanded wanderers, we can become explorers, which lets us explore the world we kind of already see that exists. This is also the case for exploration when you travel to certain locations, as you can see local landmarks and visit foreign courts. It's a great mechanic and I love the Seeker 3 Wanderer DLC, but let's address a bit of an elephant in the room here, information access. I think it's reasonable to argue that the Duke of Connacht may be aware that Sicily exists. I can also see the case that the Count of Argyll may know that Cordoba is in Spain, but beyond that, the King of Bengal would probably have no clue about Denmark, and the King of France had most certainly not heard of Tibet until a bit later during the Crusader Kings period. Well, that's a misnomer. They may know that a faraway land like Tibet or Denmark may exist, but they most certainly should not have access to maps of the area. This is something that I think EU4 does well with hidden information in the form of unexplored land, and with Southeast Asia, Asia and Japan being added to Crusader Kings III soon, I would argue that Crusader Kings is really missing a form of this feature, because let's be absolutely clear, Hastin has certainly done a lot of things and visited a lot of places. But yeah, at this rate we're going to see him raid Kyoto and become a samurai, and at some point I have to say, okay, enough is enough, we should stop this. Albeit that line frankly was already crossed when they added the ability for Hastings to become Khan. Random memes aside, I think it also presents an insane case of missing potential. Crusader Kings III is at its core a roleplay game, and imagine how cool it would be to commission individuals to become explorers for you to discover faraway lands like Malaya, or even maybe sail to Japan or visit China. How cool would it be for a Muslim caliph from Baghdad to sponsor a settlement of Ajuran, or even, dare I say, in a multiplayer game where one player is running a country sponsoring wandering explorers, they are actually exploring uncharted lands and reporting them back, where exploration actually mattered. And the great unknown is actually unknown, and is a true unknown. Now, Crusader Kings III, in my opinion, is certainly a fine enough game without this feature, but I do think exploration here is a missed opportunity. Sure, Fog of War is at least somewhat modelled with a diplomatic range mechanic, and I appreciate being able to see what's happening in India from like a, I wonder what the AI is up to kind of element, but it certainly sucks from an exploration point of view. As such, I think it's reasonable to say that exploration sucks in Crusader Kings, because it frankly doesn't happen. With that said, we can now move on to EU4, a game taking place during the literal age of discovery. This was the time period where Europe wondered what's on the edge of that map, so they ventured forth and realized that instead of dragons, there were massive continents out there full of literal money, known as gold, hidden away inside of mountains, but also money in the form of crops that grew out of the ground, and most amazingly, these continents were full of people that were not aware of how gun worked, and most crucially had a significant shortage of Jesus. This is an era of exploration, where feats such as circumnavigations and exploration of the oceans would define the identity of not just Europe but the world as a whole. Expectations here are high. So let's start with the positives. We do have a terra incognita Fog of War mechanic, and indeed the Count of Connacht is no longer aware of what is happening in northern China, or even, for that matter, the existence of China in 1444. Yay! The discovery of the New World is also a pretty central event, not just for the colonizers that now get access to free land out west, but to every nation in the game. Every nation that, for example, has fish has the price of said fish impacted by Newfoundland settlement. And indeed, this New World out there is impactful even to those that are trying to ignore it. With that said, what is the experience, as it were, of exploring the thing? Well, starting at the beginning, to do exploration, you need to grab exploration ideas, or in the case of someone like Norway, grab your can recruit explorers and conquistadors idea from your national ideas. In super tryhard EU4 circles that I certainly partake in, certain MP mods have a decision you can press called I want to colonize, which lets you get the can recruit explorers and conquistadors ideas, as well as some colonists. So why is this not just enabled by default? I know people saying that not every country should be able to colonize, and I don't disagree implicitly, but first of all, every country in EU4 can colonize, because every country in the EU4 can take colonial ideas. And my main complaint is, why is hiring a guy to explore require 400 bird points and an idea group? Sure, not every country was able to sponsor colonial expansion, Lord knows many tried though, looking at you, Kurland and Scotland. But Marco Polo was still able to visit China despite the fact that Venice didn't drop 400 doves into a sacrificial altar before his journey. That small complaint aside, exploration in EU4 involves taking 3 boats, either light ships or heavy ships, giving them an explorer and pressing the Go Explore Area button. Now, colonization already, in my opinion, in EU4 is incredibly dull. It involves grabbing a colonist, finding a province you want to colonize, pressing a button, waiting, and then after a couple years coming back, seeing a completed colony and pressing the next province. Exhilarating gameplay for sure, but exploration is somehow even worse. It's particularly automated in the sense that to explore everything you need to wait for the Can Explore button to come up on screen, when you can then select the next area and keep going. Which does create a weird busy walk of click province to explore until you run out of options, then you wait until you finish exploration or get a range tech, or, expand militarily, and then you click the button again. It's fine at best, but at that point let me just put a bunch of ships on auto-explore and just explore things when they get the ability to do so, instead of requiring me to do a frankly pointless little bit of micro. And on that note, the auto-explore feature does work because there's basically no danger from exploration. Look, exploration is a dangerous activity, and for every successful story of a person doing something incredible like crossing the Sahara or climbing Mount Kilimanjaro, there are plenty of unheard stories of people that try that and fail. Even in the success cases, like the first circumnavigation in the world by Spain, that involved 18 people surviving from an original crew of 270 people. And again, this is considered a successful trip. Even when not exploring, walking through jungles or navigating ocean waters is pretty dangerous, so why is the risk of exploration in EU4 exactly 0? Okay, you can lose ships when attempting circumnavigation, sure, but conventional exploration literally only lets you explore areas you can explore safely. Which is like the opposite of exploration and creates a weird dynamic of, hey chaps, can you explore the Indian Ocean for me? To which the explorer you hired goes, yeah, no, sorry, that'd be a bit too dangerous, that's going to be outside our supply lines, we can't do that. And we have a perfect understanding of what the Indian Ocean actually means, and hence we know that we can't explore the whole thing because of the lack of our supply lines, but we also don't have any knowledge about the Indian Ocean, so yeah, that's unexplored, but trust me, it's too far away to explore. Indeed, the only danger while exploring, whether by sea or land, is the event where natives force you to spend 50 more doves or 50 more swords to grab a new conquistador explorer, and that's it. Land exploration is somehow even safer than naval exploration, because not only is it fully automated when you press the Search for the 7 Cities button, but your exploration party is able to reinforce their crew from the manpower pool of your nation using quantum entanglement. And since exploration of the New World is basically a Tech 5 plus activity, meaning that you'll probably have no Tech 5 if not higher by the time you attempt it, and natives have Tech 2, if they ever do rise up when you're walking around, it's a trivial fight at best, or literally a one-day slaughter. There is no risk or risk of loss in exploration, which dramatically reduces the excitement of the whole affair. However, yet again, it gets worse. See, even in early EU4, people would complain that by the 1700s, the AI would run out of things to colonize in the Americas, and hence you'd see stupid things like Spanish Siberia in the endgame, or whatever. However, this problem has only gotten worse, with the whole world, Africa included, being colonized by like the 1600s tops. This also meant that exploration is something that gets finished super quickly, and as faster colonization and expansion means that exploration range also increases substantially, and it's not unreasonable in a conventional Spain game, for example, to have the whole world explored in like 1550. The map knowledge from your tech group and neighbors diffuse to you, and of course, well, not only can you steal maps, you can also just politely ask people for maps. Turns out if you wanted to explore the Congo, all you had to do was just ask. They had perfect maps of the Congo the whole time, and indeed were happy to give them to you for literally free, because you're paying them some prestige, not even money, meaning, again, I want to stress this, you can politely obtain maps of the whole world by just being nice. Why explore when you can ask the guys that live there? But indeed, it means that exploration and indeed even global colonization is finished rather quickly, way ahead of the historical time is done, and global exploration is weirdly timed because you can't explore dangerously, but at some point the game just goes, okay, you can discover the world now and you have enough colonial range for everything. But maybe it can be made a bit better by uncovering cool stuff in the Great Unknown. Well, kind of, since you can sometimes find one of the 7 Cities of Gold, for example, or the Fountain of Youth, which gives you province buffs. However, outside of that, it's actually quite predictable, since people tend to be aware that the world looks like that, and finding Brazil inside of Brazil isn't exactly a big shocker. There is an alternative setting of generating a random new world, which is quite cool conceptually, but that feature gets around the same amount of love as orphans get from their parents, and to call it broken in its current form would be a severe understatement. Exploration truly is neglected in EU4, but surely as we move into Victoria, it gets better. No, it doesn't. So let's set the scene, as it were. The world is changing, with industrialization and new developments in politics, philosophy, and science revolutionizing quite literally everything. The world, while mostly explored, is still vast and still hides many wonders, and as such, with more funding, more resources, and a never-ceasing desire to discover and find new stuff, we get everything from the Challenger expedition, which, laid the foundation of oceanography itself, to the aforementioned David Livingstone's Africa expeditions, and of course we could forget Robert Peary's Arctic expeditions to the North Pole. Now what do we get in Victoria 3? Well, we get some journal entries. I mean, they're nice, someone did try, but dear god, it's almost an insult, because they're present enough to say, yeah, we recognize exploration's important, guys, and then proceed to be insanely forgettable. Now, Victoria 2 certainly wasn't exactly leagues ahead on the topic itself, and things like finding Lake Lake Bismarck, it was less disappointing than what's present in Victoria 3. I mean, I think, to be honest, what I feel about the Victoria 3 exploration system is they just checked a box to say that we have exploration was their journal entry mechanic and called it a day. With the EU4, for example, I feel like there's actually some genuine attempt and things to critique. And CK3 didn't really try, but Victoria 3 acknowledges the problem, shoved out a bare minimum solution to take a box and called it a day. I understand that exploration and that whole genre of issues could be fixed in an exploration DLC, but let's be honest, at this point that's a summary of the game as a whole, and frankly it's a game that continues to disappoint. In truth though, I have nothing more to say on that topic outside of repeating my disappointment. And with that I want to move to Stellaris, to move into space and to move into the final frontier. Stellaris is in a weird spot with its exploration, and hence my criticism. Now firstly, outside of our human expectations of whoa, space, Stellaris is working with a pretty blank canvas here, meaning we have a lot of creativity while also having the entire genre of sci-fi as both inspiration and as a benchmark. While exploring in Stellaris, you will encounter cool stuff, different types of stars, planets and asteroids. Located on them, you'll find everything from different anomalies to broken ancient megastructures to ancient archaeological digs and a plethora of space fauna, keeping everything nice and alive. It's cool, and indeed so far I've only mentioned positives, because exploration from that domain is great for the first 100 hours of gameplay. After which, you've finished it. You've seen every event, you can tick off the genre of exploration as completed. This is an exaggeration, of course. Yes, there will be more obscure exploration events and anomalies that take more time to uncover, but really you're done. And if exploration like colonization in EU4 or say the intrigue lifestyle in Crusader Kings III were optional, I'll be happy to leave it here and say exploration in Stellaris is great. Now, before I get to the actual main criticism, I also want to be clear here and say that from release Stellaris, the dev team have put a lot of effort into improving exploration, with automatic exploration being added as a technology, then being made available from day one, and now in the Stellaris 4.0 days, automatic exploration can not just auto-explore but auto-do anomalies and auto-siege archaeological sites depending on your settings. So it's not a neglected issue, but a couple inherent problems within Stellaris conspire to make exploration suck. Firstly, exploration in Stellaris is mandatory. In Stellaris, you start the game with a system under your control, or in specific starts, one system and 2 allies in a federation with you. But the rest of the galaxy is an unknown, and hence you need to explore the rest of the universe. This is an optional, and it's something you do in every single campaign of Stellaris. Next, exploration is a very early game heavy activity, because at the start of Stellaris you have exactly 1 planet. I'd say anything up to 5 planets is still early game, but you get the point. Your taking speed shouldn't be instant, and resource limitations early mean that most of your micro or gameplay revolves around exploration, as the state building or warfare aspects of the game can't exactly take place yet because you haven't done enough scaling. This means that every single early game of Stellaris is naturally more focused on exploration, as it's one of the few things to actually do. And here, Stellaris' legacy of absolutely terrible late game performance, combined with the fact that most people do just feel like they won in the late game and hence start new campaigns, mean that I would say for every 1 campaign it gets to the point where exploration is finished and every system is claimed and a late game of Stellaris can occur, at least 10 if not more campaigns ended earlier. Mean you end up doing 10 early game exploration runs for every run that gets late and hence no longer deals with exploration. And I enjoy the Stellaris late game, and I try to get to it. So I'm prepared to say that the numbers overall in the player base are probably going to be much worse, quote unquote, than mine. Which puts even more content strain on the exploration side, because you can have less detail in a late game megastructure like a ring world if they're seen 1 in every 10 games. But every game practically lasts long enough to discover a precursor, for example. I don't think it's a fault of the exploration system as a whole, and having more events, more anomalies, and more cool stuff to discover would certainly help, but I do believe another suggestion that needs to be seriously considered is a mid-game start option for Stellaris. Yet again, in my second video in a row when discussing Stellaris, I'd like to bring up Master of Orion 2, a game released in 1996 for crying out loud, but a game that had the option for what's called an advanced start. This start saw every single civilization, player included, begin the game with a selection of colonies already established, a selection of early game technologies researched, and around 80% of the map, or 100% on a smaller map, of the whole galaxy discovered and explored. This gave you a jumpstart option for the empire building enjoyers and skipped the early game tech and exploration. Naturally, this jump was less efficient than what could be achieved with optimal microplay yourself, but I believe it is the only way to make exploration within Stellaris optional. Something that would make me appreciate exploration a lot more if it was a feature I could engage with on my own terms and not something I had to do in every single Stellaris campaign. Stellaris kind of half has this feature. There's a domain of console commands, one of which is called mature_galaxy, which simulates 100 years of the galaxy and plonks you 100 years into the game, where the early game exploration is for the most part, I would say, complete because you've either explored the areas that you've colonized or you've met other empires that have done so. I would love to see a start game version of this, which is less buggy, more refined, with extra setup options like sliders on the AI scale, for example, and of course an option where this doesn't disable achievements. Otherwise, Stellaris exploration sucks because while it remains excellent in theory, like an unwanted guest, it forces me to engage with it every single campaign. But to conclude, I believe exploration sucks frankly due to a variety of reasons, from titles like Crusader Kings not even trying, not really, and leaving some missed opportunities, to EU4 leaving a lot to be desired, to Victoria 3 just ticking Ahaz's exploration box, to finally Stellaris, giving the last best hope for exploration within the game, but ultimately in my opinion, being on the disappointing end as you start replaying the game more and start clocking in hour counts above the 200. I would say tell me what you think in the comments down below, but I believe you're going to do so anyway. So that's all for me today, but thank you very much for watching, with a special thank you to all my channel members, especially Ark, Solar, W Haste, Lemon, Star72, Lord Zendikar, Nick Fassbender, Nanhatan, Nick Huss, The Awesome Rabbit, Best for Gaming, Grandma Flavia, Sov, Mobkiller, Anthony35, AC Napo, Glorious Leader, Frankie, Yukata, Danray, Private Claw, Jack, Malvi, Conspiracy Pizza, and Lebarelu.